the club was closed and I was in the booth with him, he and I were just there conversating like what you and I are doing right now, just talking about club life. Just he and I, just me and him in Zanzibar. I will never ever forget that. If anything, never mind the Kiss FM thing, just the mere fact that this man stood there with me and had a conversation. I'm talking with an iconic DJ, okay, in the booth, and we're just talking like we've been friends for the past 15, 20 years.
All right, so today is Wednesday, July 16th, 2025. Who are we speaking with?
Trevor Fox.
Let's talk about radio DJs and mentorship. What made Saturday night radio shows like Ted Courier and Larry Levan so special to you?
Well, for one, I was always very imaginative since a child. Oh boy, I could show you. I wish I could, but I'd have to dig those up on maybe another date. But I have literally, well, there's one drawing that I have on Facebook of the original drawing of when I was like maybe like 14 years old, where I literally drew and designed the concept of a DJ console that I would love to have if I was DJing out there on the circuit, which did come to fruition. It's right here. um, and having that type of imagination, by listening to these DJs playing, it only fulfilled the dream that I had, you know, of being on that radio station one day. Okay, I remember, I tell my wife this story, of when I was imagining what I used to do when I was a kid. I had a closet. And I used to pretend that that closet was the actual radio station that I was playing at. The way I set the closet up, I built like a makeshift console in there with the turntables. It was like a studio in the closet. And let me tell you, when you close your eyes, that's why I tell a lot of DJs now, when you talk about mentorship, like the newer DJs that's coming in, the kids who want to learn to DJ and stuff, I tell them, listen, let your imagination run free, because no matter if you're playing to 2,000 people at once, which I've done in my career, to 20 people or 2 people, once you close your eyes and you have that make-believe and you have that imagination, hey, the sky's still the limit, you know? And with Larry and Ted Courier, when I listened to them play, what I did was I literally took what I was listening to, okay, and singed that together with what I was trying to create as far as my own style, you know? I knew exactly what and how I wanted to sound. But by listening to them, it was like a guide keeping me on the path of how I should be playing. And I really thank those guys, you know, um, being able to listen to them freely on Saturdays. It was an awesome thing because they both had a certain technique, you know, that I really, really love. Tony Humphries as well. Kudos to him too. Tony was inspirational as well. um, I want to give you a short, brief history on that with Tony, if that's okay.
Please do, please do. And by the way, Tony was my OG too. To me, he's
Oh,
personally, yeah, like
there you go.
I used in high school, I would stay up late and I would record 45 minutes and then flip the table over and record 45 minutes. And that would be my soundtrack on my Walkman walking to and from high school.
Wow,
You know?
there you go.
And then I would actually trade cassettes with folks in London for London DJs because they wanted the Tony Humphries tapes. So it became a thing. But please share your story. Share your testimony. Testify, brother. Testify. Testify.
Tony Humphries. I remember the era when Tony Humphries started playing, when he started playing on Kiss FM, because I would, like I said, I would listen to the radio stations and the dance parties religiously. And I think Kiss FM was originally called WXLO, if I'm not mistaken. But Shep Pettibone was the DJ at the time. And he was like the biggest thing prior to when Tony Humphries took over, because Shep went into production. So I remember when Tony was doing the dance parties, and he too, I would listen to his shows. And I remember I listened to Tony for about, I would say maybe let me see, that was in 82, roughly, when he started playing it. 82, yeah, 82. So I listened to Tony for roughly about 3 years, listened to him. And I remember I was always the shy type. I humble, overly humble. That's my wife would say, you're too humble. Get in there, you know? And I was like, boy, how do I approach Tony? Because I really wanted to get on Kiss FM. And I was like, all right, Trev, you're gonna have to go and meet this guy, right? So I get my confidence up, get in the car, jetting through the Holland Tunnel. I'm going to Zanzibar, right? I'm going to Zanzibar, and I'm going to meet Tony tonight. So I get over there. I got my Maxell tapes, the Maxell Gold. You know, I made sure that you guys remember those? I made sure it was the highest quality tape. And man, I got those 2 tapes in my pocket. And I get there early as the club is opening. And Tony's in the booth. And I was like, okay, Trev, you know, I go like this across my heart. And I go around to where the door is in the back of the booth. And I says, okay, all right, you're going to knock on that door, Trevor. You're going to knock on that door. And I tapped on the door. I didn't knock. So I tapped on the door. And I was surprised that he heard it, because he had the sound system on. And you already know what that sound system was like in Zanzibar. Huh. So I knock on the door, and he opens up. And he goes, hey, how you doing? I say, how you doing, Tony? And I just had to turn up the professionalism. How you doing, Tony? I'm Trevor Fox, blah, blah, blah. Man, I listen to your show all the time, man, and it's fantastic. You know, I just wanted to give you these 2 tapes. You know, I know you're busy right now, blah, blah, blah. You're getting ready. But I just wanted to leave these 2 tapes with you, you know, because I have an interest in playing on the Kiss FM dance parties when you're not, you know, available to do the shows, right? So he goes, okay, great, thank you. And he says, come on in. Yes. I was getting ready to hear him say, okay, thanks, and close the door. You know what I'm saying? He said, come on in. And man, let me tell you, I went inside the booth with him, and I just stood on the side. When I tell you, all night, okay? I was in the booth with him all night, from the time the club opened till the club closed. The club closed that morning about, well, you remember how it used to be back in the day. It was a beautiful thing. You could party till like 8 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? The club, he finally kicked them out like about, it was close to 9 o'clock, right? And would you believe that even after the club was closed and I was in the booth with him, he and I were just there conversating like what you and I are doing right now, just talking about club life. Just he and I, just me and him in Zanzibar. I will never ever forget that. If anything, never mind the Kiss FM thing, just the mere fact that this man stood there with me and had a conversation. I'm talking with an iconic DJ, okay, in the booth, and we're just talking like we've been friends for the past 15, 20 years, you know? It was beautiful. The spirit in the booth, and we're just talking about people who we know and stuff. And then we, of course, had to part because we had to get some sleep. And I said, okay, well, anytime you get around to it, you know, you listen to the tapes and you get back to me. He said, okay, Trev, thank you, man. I will. Get in my car, okay? Get back on the what you call it there through the Holland, heading back to Brooklyn because I still live in Flatbush. And I never forget, I was coming down the street, and of course, back in the day, I used to have a sound system in my car. I mean, it was like I was driving with a mobile Zanzibar in that car. It was killer. So my little brother, who was into music now, well, for a while now already, he's on the reggae circuit, and he says to me, he was on the terrace of the building, and he heard me coming down the street. He couldn't wait because back then, remember, there were no cell phones, right? It was just pagers. And he said to me, Trevor, because he knew that I had this passion to be on the station. And he knew what I was going to Zanzibar for. He said, Trevor, you're not going to believe who just called. I said, who? He said, Tony Humphries. I didn't even get in the door. And Tony listened to those tapes there. He had to have listened to the tapes there at Zanzibar. Okay? And he called up and he told my brother, tell your brother to please give me a call, blah, 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 blah. And I called him and he said, Trev, these tapes were vicious. When can you do a dance party? I went, oh man, tomorrow. I said, oh, yeah, man, I don't know when. Tomorrow. You know, and that's the other thing with Tony and I, you know, we have this, I mean, we're always laughing about stuff because we laugh, like I told that morning, we were just laughing about stuff and society and way it is, blah, blah, blah. And anytime he sees me, like, let's say, the last time I saw Tony, I haven't seen him in a while. I have to go and visit him at an event that he's doing. Usually he's at Levan. But when he comes to New York again, I have to go to another one of his events. But when he is there at an event and I walk in, the first thing he says, the first thing he does, he looks at me and he starts laughing. He goes, don't start. He said, don't start, you know, but beautiful brother, beautiful brother. And like I said, if it's one thing that I remember, it's that the time that he took out and we just spent time just talking, you know, about music. That was a beautiful thing.
Incredible story. Thank you for sharing. Well worth the detour.
Yeah.
Tell people who've never experienced it what Zanzibar was, and tell people its relevance to the New Jersey and the New York tri-state scene, and tell people about the Zanzibar experience.
Well, the Zanzibar experience, what I liked about Zanzibar with that experience, because, well, if you know the history of that club, it was called Abe's originally. And it was just like your really run-of-the-mill bar spot, you know, with a decent sound system, you know, nothing on the level of Zanzibar. And, you know, owners came in, took it over, and they revamped it. And what it was at that time, particular time, you had the Paradise Garage, which was in full effect. And the owner wanted to have the same culture there in Jersey. So Zanzibar was the answer to that. You had other clubs that were out there. You had Cheetah, what's that other place? Club America, and these places. But nothing like Zanzibar. Okay. And that was the closest feel that at the time that you were going to get to the Paradise Garage. Okay. And Richard Long did a very good job in doing that, you know, in putting the sound system in there. And then you had very good DJs that spun there. You had Larry Patterson, may he rest in peace. You had the late T. Scott. Okay. I remember the first time I went to Zanzibar, it wasn't actually Tony, it was actually T. Scott that I went to go hear. And he was amazing. He was amazing because I used to hear T. Scott at Better Days, you know, but when you think about going from Better Days to something with a sound system of that magnitude, you know, it was just amazing. And of course, T. Scott, like all DJs, they have their talents. He had a real um, he had a real talent, a real palate for music. T. Scott. Um, he brought a lot of the genres to the fold, you know. And when Tony came on the scene, what was great with that was not only did he play the classics themselves, but he introduced house to Jersey. And this is where they get the Jersey sound, you know. Tony Humphries was very instrumental to that, you know. And with that said, this is what gave Jersey its own personality in regards to their music. I truly believe.
How would you describe and define the Jersey sound?
Somewhat soulful. I should say very soulful. Very soulful. Very four to the floor on that kick. They love that kick. There's something about that Jersey kick, you know. And the music was not too bright. It's funny, not colorful, but not bright either. That's what I look at as the Jersey sound.
Let's talk about block parties and sound systems.
Oh yeah.
Describe the energy and setup of a Brooklyn block party back in the day. What made them unforgettable?
My first experience, what made it unforgettable, first experience, what really wanted me to be a DJ as far as mobile is concerned. Um, when I would hear, like I mentioned earlier, when I would hear a lot of these sound systems, which were, I would say, owned by a lot of West Indian DJs, they used to sink thousands of dollars into their sound systems. Um, I think that one of the best that I've heard back then was a gentleman. I don't remember if his name. No, I think that was the name of the sound. It was called Fantasia. Okay, and believe it or not, he was a Queens DJ that came to Brooklyn to terrorize Brooklyn. He came to this park. There was a park in Flatbush called Foster Park, and I will never forget what this sound system sounded like. Um, the sound system I literally heard, I would say about, I would say it was about a half a mile away. Okay, and that's when I tell you clean, clean, clear. Um, the audio quality was incredible, you know, and that inspired me to want to get my own sound system when I could afford it at the time because I was a kid. But when I heard that, it really made me really respect what sound really is and how it should be presented to well, whether you're a client or a person who's dancing out there, you know, um, being receptive to what's being played, the programming and such. But sound quality was the main objective. And I definitely experienced it because there was a variety of DJs. You had them, you had Starlight, you had, I don't know if you remember this brother named Flowers, Grandmaster Flowers. Yes. And let me tell you something about Grandmaster Flowers. Flowers was very technically gifted. Okay. That's another thing with myself. I'm in the technical field also with sound equipment. I don't just play music. I build things. You know, I make things, I create things. Like my console, I built that from scratch. Everything that I can possibly do. I was the tinkering kid. You know, I went to a vocational school. I've learned electrical trade. So carpentry, all that stuff. So I learned a lot of stuff from these Guyanese and Trinidadian DJs. They used to build their own speaker cabinets. They never used to go into the stores. They built their own stuff. They had the specs, and I used to watch them as a kid with tape measures, building subwoofers and all kind of stuff back then, you know. But Flowers was very good with that. He was gifted with that. There was another DJ as well who had sound. His name was, I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named, his name was Charisma. Okay. Well, Charisma also was gifted like that. He was a tech, he was a DJ and he was a tech, you know? But these DJs were inspirational. That would come to these parks and I would hear these elaborate sound systems.
This is incredible. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for the great interview.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Peace, brother. Have a good day.
Peace to you, brother.
All right.
All right.